welcome back. Oh, I forgot that I had a microphone and I don't need to yell. Hi, everybody. I think we have a few more people coming inside. Did you all have a nice break? Yeah. Are you caffeinated? Yep. Ish. Okay, good. I like that I've broken the fourth wall with my terrible French, so now we're friends. For those of you joining us online, hi, welcome back. For the second half of today, we have asked speakers to explore the quintessential ingredients that make our city places that flourish, places where people thrive. If cities can make us more human, what might that mean? And what roles do we all play? Over the next few sessions, we'll hear about the shift of downtown business districts into places where people come to play versus work. We'll explore the impact of corporate urbanism, and we'll learn about community resilience through the layered impact of compounding small actions. We're going to top the day off, oh, I'm so excited, with a glimpse into one of the brilliant brains behind the Museum of Ice Cream, where we'll be hosting tonight's reception. I hope all of you are coming to get into burlap sacks and go down slides with us. With that, let's get right into it. I'd like to welcome Derek Gagne, Principal at EDSA, Ethan Kent, Executive Director, Placemaking X, and Sarah Walsh, Senior Design Manager, Global Design, Marriott International, to the World City stage to discuss their views on the shift from the downtown business district into something more social. Please give them a round of applause.
Hello.
Hello.
All right. Thank you all for having us. Resonance and World City, they know how to do a conference, so it's great to be here. This is kind of the technicalities of it all, but I do think that it's really important that we talk about and intro the topic and who we are, because there's a lot of overlap here, and I think a lot of value that the three of us can bring to the conversation. So we're here to talk about the rise of the Central Social District, and really what that is this idea of taking the 9-to-5 business district of any city out of the city play, out of the urban scape, and really infusing that with something that is going to add activity all around. So the session description is, while the occupancy of offices in most central business districts remains below 50%, domestic visitation exceeds pre-pandemic levels in many cities. Is the future of downtown a place to play rather than work? First coined by David Milder years ago, 2022 is ushering in a new era of the Central Social District. How can cities leverage the opportunity of pleasure, people, and place? So joining us today, Ethan Kent's a co-founder of Placemaking X, developed the group to network, amplify, and accelerate placemaking, leadership, and impact globally. He's been integral in the development of placemaking as a transformative approach to economic development, environmentalism, social equity, design, digital space, and innovation. And Ethan lives here in New York. Sarah Walsh is a senior design manager at Marriott International's global design team with a focus on the Edition and W brands. Recent hotel openings include the Reykjavik Edition, Tampa Edition, and upcoming projects such as the Red Sea, which Sarah and I have been able to work on together. Sarah's passion lies in creating guest experiences around the world that unite architecture, interior design, lighting, landscape, and music, and help define the cities in which they exist. Sarah is from New York and lives in DC. And I am Derek Gagne, a principal at EDSA, where I've been working for 20 years as a team of landscape architects and planners with a global portfolio heavily focused on hospitality, but also public realm. We, in our realm of work, really pride ourselves on being the co-authors of place and the sense of place and that development. We work with team members like Ethan and Sarah on all the projects we do, obviously other developers and players in that as well. But really, what gets us excited is this visioning process and the creation of new destinations. So one thing that we wanted to start with was something that really kind of unites us together, but also the topic. And that is, recently I just read in Condé Nast this month, they list the top 50 things that will design the future of travel. Number one on that list is that hotels will set the social agenda, including conservation, sustainability, education, inclusivity, and community, directly linking kind of the place where these are as well as the use of them. So us representing hospitality, landscape, and placemaking, it's this through our work that we bring people to the city, but also engage them with the community. And I just wanted to start there, Ethan and Sarah, with how you feel the work we do as a team all really start to play into that.
So this is, I think is an exciting time as ever for our work. It's time to really sort of rethink downtown central business districts, in their incompleteness and the challenges that they're facing, lies a major opportunity. And it's a challenge they've faced for a while. It just was accelerated, obviously, by the pandemic. I was at Project for Public Spaces for 20 years. Got to work on many squares in downtowns, and we got those to work, but in a sense. But now it's the larger streets and buildings that can be reinvented because of the challenges they're facing right now. Mm-hmm. So how we work together across architects and landscape architecture, and how placemaking, but also place governance and sort of in place management come into play. And I was just speaking at the break with Tim Tompkins and Jeremy Waldrop. Tim used to run the Times Square, and Jeremy Waldrop downtown Pittsburgh, and they've created great destinations that helped drive the social resilience of their downtowns. Mm-hmm. But now they have a major opportunity to reinvent the public realm of their downtowns and attract investment, development, architecture that adds to that public space.
Right, something that's more around the clock rather than just the 9 to 5 central business district that we're known in a lot of cities, including New York and other places.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I guess for me, I think I'm not sure how many are familiar with the term bleisure, but that's business and leisure blended together. And it's everywhere in the hospitality industry. And I think the way I see this playing out most importantly is people are starting to travel for work, right? So you come on a business trip, you're going downtown, you're going to an office district for a meeting. But because you're there, so many people are now combining their leisure into it, right? So if you had a Thursday meeting, you're gonna take Friday to see your best friends. And so now you're saying, hey, come meet me downtown. Yeah. Come meet me at my hotel. The hotel has an amazing restaurant. Let's go to that restaurant. They have a nightclub. Let's go there. Let's go to the place nearby. I did some research, or you're local, come meet me here. So that blending is bringing people down to the hotels, down to the downtown areas that they're there for business, right? They're there for meetings. Mm-hmm. And now they're staying there and engaging around the clock in these places. A great example, right? And I work on a lot of editions, but I passed the edition Times Square the day that Madonna was screening our Madame X premiere. And I drove by and I was like, wow, that line is insane, right? And I think as New Yorkers, we might not want to go to Times Square, right? That's not always our first destination you want to go, but if that is something that will bring you there, that's an amazing event. Yeah. You want to go, you're now going, right? And so that's something hotels are bringing. Yeah. So, and I think even more so in this world where we're global, all of our friends, our networks, our colleagues are global. Almost every city I travel to, I have maybe a best friend in that city, right? And so there's always going to be someone that you want to meet with, and that's how I see we're engaging a lot of the downtowns. Yeah, that's a great point. I think that all ties into the fact that we're going towards community-centric cities, right? We want the sort of a village that creates a around-the-clock destination. But we also want the comforts that we need if we are residing there. So I think that trend is kind of happening across all of our industries. I'm sure, Ethan, with placemaking, you're kind of looking at tourism industry and how is that playing into it, especially in cities like New York. But with the tourism industry always reinventing itself, how did the acceleration of the last few years really change that for the good or bad? I know we had a conversation about the fact that while hotels were empty, the streets were full, right? And the open streets initiatives, all of these different elements, programs that bring people into the streets of cities like New York and other cities around the country really thrived during this time. So how has that really kind of changed those aspects of your work? Yeah, certainly. Yeah, we saw neighborhoods do well in New York and around the world, and we saw the districts that were able to sort of self-organize a little bit, that the open streets you mentioned, but adding the dining decks, the streeteries, the streets that there were new destinations that emerged, right. But there were also the parts of the city that couldn't organize, in Midtown, but others as well, suffered. But I think they're the ones that now have the opportunity and the challenge
to invite in the locals that sort of reconnected with their city in their neighborhoods to come back downtown again, to not only come back downtown as consumers of it, because you're not going to win that way. You're going to win by inviting people to help shape it, to look at the ground floors of the buildings as flexible, the streets, we could definitely reclaim some lanes of traffic in Midtown. 6th Avenue is big, and 5th Avenue as well, are big wide avenues that don't need to support the traffic they do. How we could widen the sidewalks and invite entrepreneurs, cultural groups, all kinds of demographics in the city to feel like this is their downtown again, welcome them, and it's true for cities around the world.
How do you think this new tax on taxis and Ubers in Midtown, Uptown is going to change all of that? Because I hear everything, I hear a lot of opinions, but a lot of people are saying that the streets are going to be dead from vehicles. Does that mean there's a bigger opportunity there to reclaim space for people? Yeah,
certainly a lot of traffic we've often found is taxis driving around looking for riders or people looking for parking spots. And once you limit that, and a lot of cities are looking at congestion pricing of various types. But I think when you do have that vision, you need to reclaim, you can't just get rid of cars. You need to have a vision for how to use the space more effectively.
Right.
And don't just design it. Actually, it's temporary uses are a great way to experiment. We worked on downtown Detroit, where in 3 months we were able to sort of really just activate the downtown. So you can do this really quickly with any downtown. It's really more through programming, and then that drives demand for and informs more permanent design and attracting the level of architecture and investment in the hospitality industry and others that can further add to and cement the long-term success of the central business district.
Yeah, a tourist to the city can benefit from open street programming as much as a local here. Sarah, one question for you is that tourists these days are becoming more and more participatory in the places that they visit. So it allows a deeper connection. There's more of a blurred line between whether you're visiting or staying or how long your visit is. How do you, as a brand and as a designer yourself, view the consumer as co-creators and investors and not just end users?
Right. So I guess becoming part of the participatory, it's all about you're engaging, right? So I think a lot of that you're seeing is these locals, what we were talking about, the locals and the tourists coming together. And I think one of the biggest ways we all do that, right, is F&B, so food and beverage. And I think people are always looking for as a tourist, what's local? What would the locals be going to? What would, what's the best? What am I looking for? And so I think, on our brand side, we do a lot of F&B market research, I would say. Before, obviously, we open a hotel, we study the market, we see where the holes are, we see, what the need is, what's something local, but what's also just really amazing in time for the moment, right?
Exactly.
And so we put those in, and I think by people coming to those restaurants, they're wanting to go, that's bringing them to these downtowns. They're going to these restaurants, and it's more engaging rather than just staying in a hotel and leaving, right? So it's no longer just where you sleep, it's where you actually want to be from the tourist aspect and from a local aspect.
Yeah, I think that's so dynamic and interesting because we've seen since COVID kind of is winding down. I don't want to say it's over, but it's winding down, right? We see this desire for people to really be back out there and participate fully, spend money, go to events. I mean, Fashion Week this year just ended in New York. There was like a vibrancy in the city that, we haven't seen in a long time. I felt like the US Open this year was just like, there was a lot going on that was bringing people back outside. But how is this energy being captured by groups like yourself that are talking about placemaking and strategy and how we kind of take this forward? Because that's an energy that we missed for a few years, and now that it's back, how do we kind of keep it and give it some longevity?
Definitely. So we're seeing this sort of lighter, quicker, cheaper placemaking taking off, and that's people, and that's all over Latin America and Europe and Asia. There's the Indian government worked with our Placemaking India network to develop a placemaking marathon, activating public spaces and streets all over the country.
Wow.
In Canada got grants to do similar things, but yeah. So that's getting momentum, but we need to make sure that isn't just perpetuating the status quo. We need to make sure that is building the capacity, to go deeper, to sustain downtowns and cities and to attract investment and in them that adds to place, defined by locals, that attracts tourists to have a slower experience. We talked about Montreal before. I was there recently. The open streets there are extraordinary. Go on for miles, and
I think that's an interesting term, the slower experience. I think that's really kind of unique in that we don't need people to move through these environments maybe as fast as they used to, because you capture the spend and you capture the revenue from them moving through the city slowly.
Totally, yeah. And I think tourists want that. I mean, I think they've wanted that for a while, but this pandemic almost trained us to connect deeper with the place we're in, and to want to actually not just be passive consumers, but contributors to a space and how we spend money, how we connect with people, how we smile and make eye contact with people.
Yeah. Well, I think that leads into a question for Sarah, that the venues of hospitality are often considered like the living room of the city. And there's this flow. I mean, every different product has a challenge. Sometimes the living room's on the top, sometimes it's on the street level. But that relationship to the city has really been key. And when that was kind of removed, you didn't have that street activity. And I think you were mentioning some of the different products within the Marriott umbrella. Each one has a different challenge, because sometimes you are right there on the street. Sometimes you're a conference center that's a whole block. So what kind of ways from the hospitality side are you guys thinking of that engagement? And are you seeing that engagement be even more important now that we're back into these spaces?
Yeah, of course. I think for hospitality, that's probably our number one, right? How to make guests feel welcome. Each brand, I would say, does it a little differently. So I think Edition I think is known very well as one of the most engaging with the local communities in terms of F&B, nightlife, entertainment, music venues. For example, the other ones, W calls your entry lobby in your bar the living room. And similarly, Sheridan their slogan or brand statement has always been the world's gathering place, with a focus on community, placemaking, all of that. And for example, Marriott's living room, lobby, all that entry space is considered the great room, right? So all these terms are just so exemplary of exactly what we're trying to do there. And so I think by doing that, and one more, West End, it's about wellness, and they're having all the wellness kind of aspects greet you right when you walk in. So I think each brand does it very differently.
Yeah.
And I think that's why people go to different brands for what kind of calls to them, and so I think that's beautiful. And in terms of the conference center, like you were saying, I think that's so important, right? Because if you're a conference hotel, you might be taking up the entire block, right? So you are now creating basically community on 4 different blocks, right? Because if it's the whole block, every single side is affected by you. So where do we create those curb cuts? Where do we create F&B spaces on the ground level? Where are we creating, that sense of arrival? And so all of that really just kind of bring guests in and are just so important on how we're designing that.
Yeah, so it's a challenge. I mean, as landscape architects, we're often come in to design a streetscape or design and activate spaces that may have kind of more of a dead storefront or a parking garage or something that's really not happening. And I think we always have to have this vision for what this can be or how this can function despite what's there now, because obviously our urban environments are changing so quickly. But with regard to that, Ethan, with the planning that you do in these spaces, how do you treat that with the challenges that you're given sometimes with a full block or half a block of something that may not be as active as you would like? What's the strategy around how to plan for that?
Definitely, and I think that's the next frontier, the next challenge of this work. And it's great to have brands and working on this as well. But yeah, I mean, in a way, downtowns and central business districts had a lot of suburban functions to them. They were kind of impersonal. They hit the ground, buildings hit the ground hard, more defined by the architecture than by the place. And there was sort of a monoculture of buildings around the world. Downtowns were looking more and more the same.
Right.
And yeah, I think we always think the edge of a public space is often the most important part of it.
Yeah.
It's easier to change the center and through these lighter, quicker, cheaper approaches. But now that there are some vacancies in ground floors, and some of the chains aren't quite dominating, defining space, the types of brands that sort of take value or define the place too narrowly, there's an opportunity to work with brands or local businesses or challenge brands to add to the place. And really, we talk about public space as the new anchor tenant. And place-led development. And there's an opportunity to lead with the vision of place defined by locals in ways that obviously will attract tourists to contribute more substantively and effectively, but attracting development and that adds to it. But I think there's opportunities to make smaller storefronts, if we widen sidewalks, to put kiosks on them.
Yeah.
We talk about this idea of a market city, where a healthy city has a full spectrum of informal to formal retail. We want the high-end brands, but you want upward mobility too. You want people to be able to start, selling their maker spaces, their food from where they're from, or opportunities for upward mobility to get them to give them the grants, assistance to be in a market, to be in a smaller storefront.
Mm-hmm.
Often cities are one type of retailer, one type of market, or one type of vending. And I think if we look at our central business districts as these sort of incubator spaces for entrepreneurs, but also for defining local culture, and local economies that are more inclusive, more permeable.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about the ground floor needs to be more permeable, but the economy needs to be more porous and
that's
permeable
really
too.
interesting.
And then the governance too. Just to add, also the governance is often of downtowns isn't that participatory.
Right.
So how do we create the mechanisms that support and challenge people to feel like they can shape their downtown and challenge them to contribute to its identity and future?
Yeah, I mean, and that's so dynamic because you think about in our work as in the hospitality industry where we do have space to create program, we're seeing obviously trends with outdoor fitness and outdoor gathering and as many outdoor events that we can program into a space where we have that luxury in the typical more sprawling resort. But in that urban environment, it has to kind of come out into the street. I think it's interesting too that ties back to the comment made from the gentleman that spoke about the EDC this morning. 1 in 10 new businesses in New York started during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's a lot of kind of creative juices flowing that we really need to kind of capture within the public realm and make that feel as interesting for a tourist as it is for a local who's out there in their everyday routine. Sarah, anything else that you would like to talk about regarding kind of program? Where are you seeing some of the trending going with what are developers or users kind of asking for more of? I mean, we've seen an uptick in the demand for co-work space and kind of like more open kind of spaces on the inside. Some of that kind of spills to the exterior. But what other program uses are you seeing kind of in demand right now?
Yeah. I mean, really, I think it all goes back to F&B. It goes back to kind of having that welcoming, that living room really is what really grounds it so much. Yeah. I think now that we're all returning, right? I think conference space in terms of function, meetings, gatherings in that sense are so important. So many people are coming together for the first time in years. And so I think those spaces are getting really a lot of push. And so those are just as important. I think sometimes we think of those as those one-time events, but think of how often they're being used. That's just as important. So
yeah.
An outdoor space, obviously, right? So getting that rooftop venue, getting that streetscape surrounding the entry, getting the courtyard, getting all of those items are so important.
Yeah, capturing every little square inch of outdoor space.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that there was an interesting association, obviously, with our health, our personal health, and outdoor space that isn't going anywhere anytime soon. So it affects all of our different kind of professions and industries uniquely, but also as one. I think we're winding down on time, but I think that there's a question here on what does that authenticity look like in the future? How are we maybe going to retreat and get away differently? I was just kind of thinking in my head, it's like, are we in the future going to Little Island in New York as opposed to the Cayman Islands? And I don't think that's ever going to completely change. We all need that getaway, we all need that beach. But I do think that there is this kind of thirst for a culture after a few years away from it. The museum openings in New York are going crazy right now. People are just like hungry for that. And how do we get on that train without losing the authenticity of place?
Yeah, I guess I think number one, I think this was really important before. all of this, and now it's even more so, but experiences over materiality, for sure, right?
Yeah.
And so I think people are looking for what are those trips, what are those destinations we can go to that will give me the experience that I've been dreaming of, with
Yeah.
friends and family that we haven't
You've been
seen
dreaming
in
for
so
3 years
long.
now. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I think, those destinations are just as important, and I think wellness, like your point, and, the project we're working on together, the wellness compound, I'll call it, is incredible, right?
Yeah.
And so it's very, avant-garde wellness type kind of stuff. And so that's an experience, and it's contributing to your wellness, and it's
Memorable.
it's memorable, right?
Yeah.
So for sure,
Yeah.
all of that together.
Yeah. So, sort of the mentor of the placemaking movement, this man William White, he said the best way to seed a place is to put out food. So, food is an anchor certainly, and obviously local food, local culture is so strongly connected to it. But we have this idea when you think about programming called the power of 10, something my father came up with, that is a way to make sure that there's a whole range of uses that can prevent any one use or user group from dominating the space, make sure they're anchored in public purposes, but also add to and challenge commercial activity to support it. So we think there can be campaigns for central business districts to create 10 destinations, each with 10 places in it, each with 10 things to do in it, and get the businesses to provide some of them, the city to provide some, the communities to provide some. It's that layering of uses that makes the magic, that draws out that creativity, that creates local ownership. And I'll end just saying that I think the future city and the future CBD has to look to be a lovable city, one that that reflects and builds the identity of a city, not just the livable city we want to achieve for everybody, but I think we can achieve it most affordably, most creatively, in a way that creates sustainable tourism and local investment if we look for place attachment. And that's what's going to not just attract and retain talent, but draw out talent from people, draw out talent from our cities, and showcase that. And that when downtowns create these campaigns to be lovable, defined by public spaces and people, what they could become is unlimited.
Yeah, and to end there, we're out of time, but I think that we're all moving that needle on inclusivity and all of that, but I think it's that sensitivity part of it. This how do we make places really kind of play to the senses, and how are we all doing that through our work? So I think that's a challenge that we all will face every day moving forward, but it's also what we love about the challenge we're faced. So with that. That's our time.